So, my friend, we are continuing our journey to excel in life and bring an end to the suffering. And there is a way that we should change completely from inside. Leave the world, take the world lightly. So once we are aware what is self and what is the not self, and live in that awareness, our masters guide us how to live and work in our personal, professional and social lives. And the sole aim is to purify the mind and continue working as a play and a fun, free from anxiety, stress, duality, conflict. Every action that we do accumulate good or bad result. So when we identify ourselves with the doership and the enjoyership, then the problem becomes severe. So we need to drop that doership and enjoyership. How to do that? Where lies the problem? Our masters in Eastern wisdom guides us that when we are occupied with the family, professional and social life, we should clearly understand how to remove the streams of likes and dislikes, hatred and love, pain and pleasure. Krishna, the greatest master, in the Gita, he says, Dhyayatah Vishayana Punsah Sangam Teshu Upajayate Sangat Sanjayate Kamah Kamat Krodha Abhijayate. So let us first understand the basic principle and then we will go a little deeper. So the Krishna says, whose mind dwells on the objects. So first thing, what is this object? So object is Desh, Kal, Vastu, location, time and object. And that object includes anything and everything in the world, including people, our relationship. Location is either my house, my workplace and outside. Have you not seen, some people, they stop the car at the red light and they start beating the steering. So at that location, they get into anxiety. Why there is a red light? It is impulsive, it is instinctual, it is habitual. So they are accumulating anxiety and the impressions, without anything. Now apply the same example at house. Why you need to enter into any kind of a argument based on the likes and dislikes? We'll understand that. So the master is saying Those whose mind dwells on the object. Dwelling. What is that dwelling? Likes and dislikes. With absorbing interest. So how I dwell on the objects in absorbing interest? By the sense organs. I see you and begins liking and disliking. Inside me, the other person doesn't know. So that liking and disliking causes the attachment. Why it is an attachment, we will understand slowly, step by step. And from the attachment, desire takes the form in our mind. And from the desire, anger or anxiety or hesitation is the result. So this is how the Krishna, the originator, explains the psychology of desire. But even before the desire takes birth in our mind, the origin is liking and disliking. Or you can say the origin is attachment. And why there is an attachment? Because of liking and disliking. So when the desire is fulfilled, it goes into greed, or I want to repeat the same thing. But if the desire is not fulfilled, the result is anxiety, anger, duality, conflict. You see any object, mind by default, it is impulsive, it is instinctual, it is habitual. That is how we have educated our mind, conditioned our mind. I will not say educated our mind. Sorry. We see an object, suddenly the mind comes. There is no need for the mind to come. The mind should simply see an object as an object, but the likes and dislike enters. So liking gives value to that object. And the value comes from society, habit. Look at the mention of the Hollywood actor. I like it. I like it. I think over it. I think over it. Attachment takes place. We'll understand why we give value. That's another important question. So value comes from the past impression inside my mind, and what is the trigger point? The trigger is the world outside. It may be the mention, it may be your mother. So when you say my mother, I must love, respect, even if mother is not behaving according to the ethics of the society. So then there is a conflict, and if I like by habit, creates an attachment. So we give value to anyone or any object in the world outside by thinking, liking. So when I think and like, it creates an impression in the mind. So impression is already stored. What is that impression? So what happens after The impression is created. I am already in the attachment and detachment. So when mind thinks about, because it is attached, there is a desire. Desire means to be attached, value, constant thinking, feeling in the mind, causes hesitation in the mind, anxiety, which is yet to manifest. It manifests in anxiety when an upset in duality and conflict. Same thing happens with detachment. So we have understood, but why this desire is. Slowly, one by one, we understand. There is a sense of incompleteness in me. And that sense of incompleteness invites fear, anxiety, expectation of pleasure, lot of things. The moment I feel the sense of incompleteness, the mind is agitated inside that we are not aware of. That sense of incompleteness goes into the mind. And that mind creates a desire to like, to possess, to own any object or people or anything in the world outside. To fill that sense of incompleteness, to remove that sense of incompleteness. Have you not seen, people wants to gossip because they are scared of sense of incompleteness within themselves. Come on, let us meet together, and they start gossiping. That shows a sense of hollowness inside. Why that sense of hollowness bites me all the time? Because it bites me, I feel the sense of incompleteness, and in order to remove that sense of incompleteness, I experience desire. Because I want to fill that hollowness inside me by the object, by the people, by the things, by the wealth, by the sexual pleasure, by the drink inside. The mind at that time never thinks that if the object outside can fill my inner incompleteness, sense of fear and hollowness. Then there is another movement in the mind takes place. You see that you pick up an object and let your mind consciously think of it. I like it, I like it, I like it. So that liking converts into the mind, I want it, I want it, I want it. And I want converts into I must get it, I must get it, I must get it. That creates an hesitation in the mind. See that? And that hesitation comes from ego sense. Ego sense. From where the ego sense comes? We have to understand this again and again. You have to contemplate it again and again. Whenever you mind likes something, whenever the mind dislikes something, whenever you have an anxiety, whenever you have a duality. So at that very moment you become aware. Inquire. Ask from where this ego sense has come. It comes from the sense of incompleteness. We find ourselves different and separate from the real self. What is that sense of incompleteness? I find myself separate from the real self. Where the real self lies, it is within me. And I feel separated from my own true nature. The moment I forget that, the moment I feel separate because I don't know, I'm in ignorance, I forgot. So when I forget that real self, understand that. It's a very important point. The moment we, first thing, from where the ego sense we understood from the teachings of our great masters, there is a sense of incompleteness, hollowness, loneliness inside. What does that means? It simply means that I feel separate from my real self, my true nature, which is permanent peace, happiness, love, and wisdom. So there I forget it. So when I forget it, then what happens in the mind? What is happening in the mind when I forget I don't know my real nature? The mind, in order to experience the sense of incompleteness, it says, I am mother, and I start an authority. I am rich. I am bigger. Can the wealth buy happiness? Can a relationship buy love? Can a big mansion give me that permanent state of happiness? So now see the journey of ego. It comes from objects and the people. So these streams of, what is that? These streams of the thoughts that has started from the likes and dislikes, and there is something which is ego, comes because we forget our true nature. We are not aware. We start feeling our hollowness inside with the people outside, with the objects, with the wealth outside, and that creates a stream of likes and dislikes. And in that state, what happens to the mind? That state of the mind is known in religion as sins. we accumulate sin. Sin is nothing but the streams of likes and dislikes. When we forget our real nature, then my ego takes the position. I'm mother, why don't you listen to me? I'm your dad, I'm your boss. I have more knowledge than you. I'm smarter than you. I like what you say, I dislike what you say. These are the different forms of the ego that takes in our mind, and that causes a big problem. So can you see what is the root cause of our problem? The root cause of the problem is that I am not settled in my real nature. Take two positions. I work. That I is ego, is full of likes, dislikes, pain, pleasure, duality, and conflict. And then I work out of the real nature. There is no ego. So when I work from the real nature, it is the peace and the happiness that is expressing through the body, the mind, the intellect. So the root cause is ignorance, forgetfulness, that I don't know my real nature. So that forgetfulness is the greatest sin. So when I use the word sin, it has nothing to do with the religion, cult, dogma, and belief. The greatest sin is that I forget my real nature by the chain of reactions happening in the mind with the likes and dislikes, attachment, desire, anxiety, duality, and a conflict. And then the ego sense takes care. When the ego sense, what happens? We worship our ego with attachment and detachment. We worship. So it means where there is an attachment and detachment, the ego is working behind it. That is what our masters are saying. Otherwise, every master also uses the personal pronoun I, me, and mine. But they don't mean it. We also use it. We use it from the past impression, likes and dislikes, anger and hesitation. So go a little further. Now, I'm not attached all the time. Yes, you are right. I'm not detached all the time. Yes, you are right. But what is happening? That attachment and detachment has already created impressions in the mind. It is deposited in the storehouse of the mind, karma shaya. So it is already deposited inside. You need a trigger outside. And from that storehouse, from that saving account, it comes to the mind at a time and it causes you pain and the suffering. So that storehouse, what is deposited, we normally say vasana. Vasana means, vasat means store. You can say shelter or storehouse. So that is the storehouse of good impressions and also the bad impressions. Sometimes it is said that more bad impressions are deposited or stored there because the way we lived our life, with lot of attachment, likes, dislikes, and anxiety, and duality, and a conflict. So, from where we should move. So, this likes and dislikes, or you can say attachment and detachment, or you can say the behind that desire, there are impressions of sorrow, anxiety, anger, duality, conflict. So these impressions are neither, it does not have any color. No, it is not red, it is not blue, it is not green. And these impressions do not have any size or weight. When you say, no, I'm anxious, I'm stressed, where is the weight? Where is the size? Where is the color? Because we cannot go deeper, because our mind do not understand clearly. So we say, why I became upset, there is no reason behind. There is a reason. These impressions, these contents. So, what is the point of awareness and how to let the moment in my life makes me habitual, instinctual, make me fall down, lower my awareness, it is the sin. Whatever I feel is harming me is this problem. So again ask yourself why I feel anxious, stress, duality. It comes from the past impression, the storehouse. One more point is very important. So there is a storehouse of impressions known, we say, we have used the word vasana, the past impressions. Now see that you do not know, but those past impressions is very intense. It has an intensity inside, triggered by the outer environment, people, things. What happens? It makes you angry. It makes you anxious. It makes you to hate some person. It makes you to love some person because of the attachment. We already understood. Ego lives on attachment and detachment. And the tendencies and the impressions of these attachment and detachment are buried in the karmashaya, the storehouse of memory. They are the vasanas. So nothing happened, you're happy, you're talking to a person, and the next moment you become anxious and angry. It is those past impressions that leads us to, it is the intensity. You can say, if those impressions has a tremendous intensity and something is working behind your mind, and in the next moment you become anxious and angry and agitated and duality and a conflict. So these so-called the likes and dislikes are present in the intensity of our past impression. I'll take one example. You look at your daughter. Who looks at it? Eyes. Mind says, I like it. Or mind says, I don't like her attitude. Then the tongue speaks something outside, but it means something inside. And the mind continues the journey. That intensity of disliking is already present in the mind, but because she doesn't listen to me. So when that past impression become intense, we start blaming and complaining and reacting. And once we start blaming, complaining, and reacting, we already forget our real nature. And when we already forget our real nature, so that sense of hollowness and the loneliness is working to fill the gap. The ego comes over there and the ego sense takes over my life and it makes me crazy. So, what should we do? First thing to do is to separate. Separate what? The self from the non-self. At that very moment you remember, you recall, my true nature is peace and happiness. But I am experiencing anxiety, anger, duality, and a conflict. Third movement of the mind should be to separate when my nature is peace and happiness. Why the mind you are going there? The moment you become aware of it, you will find the change instantly. You will find the change instantly. Second way is that you should be doing the regular practice. And after the regular practice, you should be contemplating and reflecting, remembering that my true nature. Whose nature is anxiety, anger, duality, and conflict? None. So let us go back and understand little more deeper. So when that desire is not fulfilled or fulfilled, because I want to fill the loneliness inside, it leads to delusion. What is delusion? Whatever I see seems true, but it is not. So I have to understand. What is that which seems true, but it is not true? The sky is blue, It appears blue, but it is not blue. But if I take for granted that the sky is blue, then I live in ignorance, incomplete knowledge. Who am I? Am I the mother? Am I the father? Etc., etc. Or am I my real nature? But if I don't do it, from the delusion comes the loss of memory. From the loss of memory, loss of intelligence. From the loss of intelligence comes the endless suffering. Suffering continues. Suffering continued. What is the method? The self-inquiry is the method. Meditation is the method. So this master, Krishna, says to raise your awareness, become aware of the likes and dislikes, and remember in the mind, this is not me. And at that very moment, when you become aware, then see clearly. Say, you are looking at me. I'm different from you. Who is looking at me? It is your sense organ. So sense organ are the seer and the knower. And I'm totally different from you. You see that once you become aware that I'm totally different and separate from you, that you are dropping the likes and dislikes. At that very moment, even talking to someone, living with someone, see the beauty. You see any object through your eyes. So eyes are the seer, but that object cannot see the seer. The relationship has to be twofold. Does the object approach to you? Come on, dear, honey, I am with you. I will live with you. For example, the car. Does the car chase you? That is the point of awareness. Because I have given value to that object or a person, mind is constantly moving and it gives a delusion that object is also moving towards me. That is the bone of contention in our relationship. I love you, honey. So with that expectation, because that honey will also move with love towards me. But he or she has the different ideas and the thoughts in the mind. And that idea that you love someone takes a very firm ground. It causes the attachment, and attachment causes the desire, and then the problem comes. So when you see the object outside, you love it, you like it, but the object never says, I like and love you. That may be a person. So that is the first level of awareness. Now, sense organs are seen by the mind. Mind creates likes and dislikes there. But we ask the mind, we reflect on the mind, but the mind is the seer of all the sense organs, but the sense organ did not bring any likes and dislikes of an object from outside. It is instinctual, it is habitual, it is impulsive. Instinctual, habitual, impulsive way of living belongs to animal kingdom. So what it has to do with the human race? The human race is a thinker. It has been endowed with an intellect. The intellect must think from where these likes and dislikes have come. The moment you know it, you experience that because of the hollowness and emptiness inside, I enter into this instinctual. Because of the habit, you become aware. Because these likes and dislikes have no size, weight, color, age, it simply drops. It simply disappears. In that field of awareness. So that is what Krishna says, Rag Dvesha Vimuktaye Tu Vishayan Indriye Charanaha. I like to recite whatever little I know. Vyukte hetu Atmavashye Vidheya Atma Prasadam Adhigachati. So what happens? You see that objects and the sense organs and the mind. And now, what is behind the mind? I get upset and I think over some people, but then I realize the mind is changing its different states, and behind the mind there is one. And the moment you can be aware at this very moment, and the moment you are aware, you find coolness and calmness inside. Prasadam adhigachati. Such a person is settled in, I can say in calmness, that passion has gone. So think in terms, when you are anxiety, ask your mind, you have an anxiety, mind will say yes. So ask, what is the weight of anxiety, shape of anxiety, color of anxiety, age of anxiety? Just start asking, where I see the anxiety, and you become aware. And that awareness separates you from these experiences, and you will find calmness. That is one way. But at the same time, we have to release all those past impressions. We should not leave the practice. We should continue the practices. And especially the last one that I gave to you. Now the mind says, okay, how should I believe you? I have done a lot of practices. So that is what you are doing, a self-inquiry. First, you take it that the real self is there, and then you inquire through your mind, through the practices. And one day you will realize. One day you will realize prasade sarva dukkhana mahani asya upajayate prasanna chetasa hiyashu buddhi parivatishthate. Do we think we are intelligent? We have an intellect. So allow the intellect to work on the mind. The mind has a desire. The intellect has a knowledge. Sense organs in the body are the means of action. So action comes in the last. desire in the middle, and the intellect on the top. So what we are doing, whatever masters are doing, they say that use your intellect before the mind desires, before the action is taken. So if the desire is there and attachment is there in the mind, we discussed about the intensity of the desire. Is so much so that it bypasses the intellect without thinking the right and the wrong, without separating my likes and dislikes. And then what happens? The intellect is sleeping, the mind pushes you, you take an action, and then you repent, you react, you enter into anxiety, and again you take an action. So if we allow our awareness and the intellect to take over the mind before it takes an action, the life is better and the beautiful. So the very process, if I say so, whatever is happening in my life, those events and incidents and the thoughts must be placed before the intellect. But even before that, if we continue the practice regularly, any practice, especially the last one that I gave to you, you continue that, and after that you start thinking. Listen to this. So it means what? The intellect is pure after the practice. It is living in heightened state of awareness at that moment. You reflect on it. Because if you don't reflect in that state of the intellect, there is no focus, there is no awareness. You will continue to live into the same state. Why we say this? Because the wisdom is taken away by the attachment, detachment, ego sense. And the wisdom is taken away, then there is no way to the journey of the self-discovery. To summarize, self and the non-self, I'm aware. You see how simple it is. Self, now I say that man and a woman, just separation, self and the non-self. When that non-self takes over the self, why it takes over the self? Because by impulsive, by instinct and by the habit, the mind goes with the liking and disliking. So, still with that liking and disliking, at the first moment, I'm aware of this, maybe I'm aware of the self and I'm aware of the non self. Now I start thinking over it. Why I start thinking over it? Because I lose awareness of the self little deeper. So that liking and disliking causes the attachment. So in that attachment, the mind is running outside. For what? Because I feel the sense of loneliness. Hollowness inside me. So that attachment and detachment leads to an ego sin. Because ego worships the attachment and detachment. Ego cannot live without attachment and detachment, without liking and disliking. So we go too far from the real self, which is already within me here and now. On the other hand, attachment, detachment, liking, disliking does not have any color, does not have an age and the shape and the size and the weight. I have to simply allow myself to be aware, use that intellect to separate the two. The mind calms down, that intensity of that desire drops. I'm living in the same world at the same time and enjoying the inner peace and happiness.